this is the second video that I'm going to do in this series of database objects videos. In the previous video, we basically enumerated through a table and mapped that to objects, in particular, well, specifically the suppliers table. So what I'm going to do is extend that a little bit. We're going to do some CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete, and I'm going to show you how that works. So before I get into that, actually, I'm going to set up some logging on the database. Now this is very simple. There's just an event handler that gets fired every time, an event that gets fired every time a statement is executed, which can really help with debugging. And so I'm going to write that out to console. And that'll just write out the entire SQL statement. So this will apply for all the inserts, the updates. Every single SQL command that gets hit on the database will actually be written here to the console as well. I'm also going to change this to use the SQL Server connection, and I've got that set up obviously here, and the same structure applies, but I'm going to use SQL Server just to show you that we can prove out that that works. Data sources localhost, Northwind database. We'll use integrated security. Okay, so just to verify that that works again, I'll just dump that out. Okay, so we should now see a list of suppliers, and the first statement is select star from suppliers. Okay, great. Okay, so the first step, I'm going to take this out, and we're going to add a function to the suppliers class called add, and it's going to return type supplier. So this is essentially a factory method. You don't need to do this, but this is the pattern that I follow. You can create a supplier from scratch, i.e. you could have new supplier, but the issue with doing that is that you do need to pass through the suppliers collection. So it's just easier to use the add function. So I'm going to add function in the base class. I'm just going to return new supplier this. So that will create a new object. It won't do anything to the database per se. It'll just create an object in memory that we can then manipulate. So the next step is to add a save function. So there's a save function already on the supplier class, so we can just invoke that, and internally that will know that it's a new object. There's a is saved flag, and by default that will be false. Therefore it will know that it needs to do an insert statement versus an update statement. Okay, so if we go back to creating the supplier, so let's do a new supplier, and we're just going to set the name on the supplier. And call save. Okay, so if we run that now, we might get a few errors, but we'll just see what happens. Some of these fields are required, so I'm not sure if that's going to work. Okay, great, that worked. Okay, so we can see that the insert statement was executed, inserted these new values based on the field mappings that we'd set up in the supplier class. So it grabbed those values from here and created the insert statement, and that was to get the supplier ID back out and put that back into the object. So at this point here, the new supplier would have a new ID, which would be, let's have a look in here. Move this out of the way. Okay, so it would have an ID of 30. Okay, so that's pretty simple. That's all you need to do to create an object. It'll handle all the inserting, the updating, and creating the SQL statements. So the next thing what I'm going to do is show you how to retrieve an object based on, rather than the ID. You can retrieve it based on ID, but I'm going to also show something a bit more important, which is I think is retrieving it based on a name, which is what I call a key field. So to do that, we can specify a key field on the class, and that will hook into all the key functions that are specified in database objects. So the key field is company name, and I'm going to create a default supplier, this, and we want to pass through the company name. And return the object. So there's a function called object by key. Object by key exists. Object exists. These functions will all use that key field intrinsically. So all you need to do is pass through the actual object value that you want to get by key. So in this case, it's the company name. And essentially, it'll create a select star from suppliers where company name is equal to this value, and return that object. If that object doesn't exist, it will throw an exception as well. So you can't, that's why there's the exists function. So I actually might just add that in as well. So return object exists, company name. Okay. So if we hop back into here, we've created this new supplier. We'll take that out, and we'll access that by name. Okay. Okay, so we can see select star from suppliers where the company name is equal to new supplier, and that will have returned our object. We can have a look at that. Okay, so if we have a look at the actual value, we can see that company name is company name. And as I was saying before, there's a distinct value. So that's the 30, that's the company ID, and is saved as true. Okay, great. So that's fairly simple as well, I think. Like I said before, you can access it by ID. There's no reason. To do that, you can use the object function. So if we do company by ID, here, that will do the same thing. So that will use the distinct field here. So it'll use that to actually obtain the object and apply the correct where clause. However, generally speaking, that's not something I use that often, but that option is there. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is how we can delete a supplier. So we've created one, we've loaded one. Actually, we might, before we do that, we'll probably just update it, just to prove out that that actually does work. Company name, new supplier, name 2. So let's give that a go. So that'll load the object, update that company name property, and we do need to save that as well. So adding a supplier save. And so this should perform an update. There we go. So we're updating it, and based on the ID. So it's using the ID as the unique way to update that, which makes sense. Okay, so that's updating it, deleting it. Again, fairly simple. There's a couple of ways you can delete it. You can use the collection. So on the suppliers, we can delete, and we can pass through the supplier. Object delete, and pass through supplier. So that is one option. The other option as well is to just add a delete function on here, which I think is a little bit more intuitive. Okay, so that'll use all the internals that it already knows, for example, the company ID, and it'll obviously perform a delete statement on that. Okay, so let's just delete this supplier that we're getting. Got a new name for it. So let's just delete that. And run that. Okay, great. So we can see, obviously it's loading it again and then just deleting it based on the ID. So all those basic operations are there. Okay, so that's the end of the second video. Thanks for watching.